What if I told you that there's just one thing that runs our world? One little, seemingly insignificant material formed to look a certain way that only has value because humans collectively, or I should say a specific group of humans, have collectively placed value on it, and in turn have gotten everyone else to accept that value as well. This piece of paper, or actually plastic because I'm holding onto a Canadian bill, has a huge impact on us every single day. I always think that everyone's a money person because money impacts everything we do, from putting a roof over our head to the food in our stomach to the clothes on our body, and it can also cause a lack of those things too. It's just that some people know more about it and how it works than others. And something I've been thinking about a lot lately is the one thing that money seems the most synonymous with: fear. Fear of not having it, fear of losing it, fear of not doing the right thing with it, fear of running out of it, fear period. But where does this fear come from? And why do we feel this sense of fear when it comes to money? And who's responsible for the fear? It used to be that only the traditional institutions like the media, the banks, the government, people on Wall Street, basically anything that you could consume solely from the paper that you read, the radio station you listened to, your news channel of choice, and the bank that you walked into to cash a check, had any say on what you could do or what you should do with your money. It's kind of like we had this one source and one consistent message about money and therefore life, because it was in all of these institutions' best interest, in order to keep making money for themselves, to be on the same page and make sure that people lived their lives in a similar way. And one method that was really used to influence people at this time was fear, because fear is a big motivator. And it's not like this advertising or influencing was being promoted as being fear-based. It's just that it is when you really look at it, from something as simple as getting people to use the same bank for all their different financial needs. It's like we're told, or at least it's strongly implied, that it's easiest and safest for you and your money to keep all of your money at the same bank. When really, as long as a bank account or a bank is insured, then it's actually fine for you to use multiple banks and multiple bank accounts. It's actually the way that you could potentially even get a better or the best possible return on your money. But it's not ideal for the traditional banks because they actually make more money based on the most products that you use of theirs, right? So the more that you use one specific bank and all these different products, the more money they make. But it's not like they advertise using their services as, hey, use our bank for everything because we'll make more money. Instead, they try to get you to think that it's safer for you to keep all your money at their bank. Anyways, because this is all we knew in the past, and also this message was really consistent and the most broadly shared, it's just the way it was, and it wasn't really questioned, and there was no acknowledgement of this use of fear. But now we have all of these new sources of information, and what can be used to both share more and potentially better information, options, and the why behind how our systems work, it can also create room for both more people who want to prey on others' naivety to make money. It can also create more fear, because now it's all about who's actually right here. Who do we listen to, and why does so much information contradict? Like if you thought that something like investing was complicated before because the banks, the media, and the government was telling you that it was, so that you'd get a financial advisor to do it for you, so that you could then pay them to do it and they could make more money, well, now you might know that it's actually not so hard to do it yourself, but you do have a new layer of complication added in there, which is what should you actually invest in? And there's countless different examples of this. The big one recently was the whole SBF, FTX, ABC breakdown that led to millions of people losing thousands and thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency. And the problem is that a lot of people were promoting it for money on the internet at the same time. Seriously, if you haven't heard of this one, we're gonna get Dennis to break it down for you.
So this guy, this 30-year-old who quickly grew his net worth by over $16 billion by creating a cryptocurrency exchange, went bankrupt basically overnight. It turns out that it was all fraud. He was basically spending customer money and playing games. And now that the people who actually put their money into this investment, now that they want it back out, they can't, and guess what? It's all gone. And now what also happened is that a lot of people, and I mean both traditional personal finance figures and a lot of people online, were paid to actually promote it, and their audiences who listen and put their money in, they're not too happy right now.
Or there's a throwback to the GameStop and AMC days of 2020, which it's crazy that that was 3 years ago. In that case, some people did make some money in the short term, but any thoughts about long-term investing just went completely out the window. So more and newer information isn't always the right information either, but it doesn't mean that the old stuff is better, it just means that there's more to sort through and figure out now. And all of this stuff has made us think more negatively than before, or at least that's how it feels like it's going. And it also seems like we're in even more fear now because the fears are exposed. Now, I personally still think that more information is still better, because it means that hopefully people have the ability to be more aware and more empowered to choose the best option for them, instead of just being told to blindly follow some path as if it's the best option for them when it might not be. But I still see the problem with the situation that we're currently in. It's kind of like access to more information has also left people accessing the wrong information. And I'm using the word wrong really loosely here, because I do think there's a time and a place for entertainment and just like stupid fun stuff to look up and look into as well. But if we're not using some some of our time to look into information that can really help us learn more and also benefit us in our lives, I definitely think that's unfortunate. And on the flip side of all of this, there's also people who just genuinely don't have time to dig into all of this and figure out what the right information is. So then who did they listen to?
I want to bring this down to a more personal level now. Fear and money being tied together and being ingrained in us starts even before we start listening to the news or even before we open up our own bank accounts. It starts at home with our families and the people that we're surrounding ourselves and talking to. Take word of mouth, for example. It's one of the best ways to spread a message. And I mean, sure, some of the messages might start from the big institutions, but even if we look at even the times before the internet, the way that a lot of messages got around was because people talked. What's interesting to me though is that if we take a look at two groups, so people who don't have a lot of money, and I mean barely enough money to make ends meet on a daily basis, and we look at another group of people who do have enough money to survive and are actually living the believed middle class dream, both groups can have a fear of money. Seriously, it's like the fear of not having money turns into the fear of not having enough money or losing money as people go from a lower class to a higher class. It's almost as if the fear evolves and is constantly changing, and it just doesn't disappear. Anyone who works for their paycheck or has bought into the messaging that we all hear, so pretty much like the vast majority of people, is constantly being fed this emotion. And listen, it starts at a really young age, and it also doesn't help that we're constantly hearing that things are getting progressively worse. And once again, this ties into the fear piece. Like seriously, I know you've definitely heard someone say something along the lines of, you know, things aren't like what they used to be. Things were better when I was young. 10 years ago, I could do whatever it is that they could do 10 years ago. But like, is that actually a useful thought to have? I saw something recently that talked about the history of people saying that men are becoming too feminine these days, and here's the actual Twitter thread about it. Basically, this guy goes through the history of how the same thought and the same words have been used since literally like 400 BC. Like right now, there's obviously this trend in people saying that men aren't masculine enough anymore, but the same exact words have been used since 2004, or they showed up in 2004, 1984, 1965, 1950, and beyond that. I think the same idea can actually be used when we're talking about money and our economy. Like yes, some things were better in the past. Like an easy one is definitely home prices and the ability to buy a home for some people. But in general, if we were to say that 10 years ago things were so much better, I'm sure that 10 years ago there's probably someone saying the exact same thing about the previous decade. It's like we're always using language that makes us feel like something used to be better in the past, when 10 years from now, we're gonna be saying the exact same thing about the time period that we're in right now. It's also kind of like when people talk about being in the present or living in the present. We're either always looking into the future or reminiscing about something that happened in the past instead of actually living in the now. I feel like the same exact thing holds true here.
We personally feel like it's not about the past being better or that we're in some inherently bad place now. It's just that fear has evolved and changed, and it's become a little bit widespread at the same time too. It's kind of like Wile E. Coyote with trying to get to the other side and not fall off the cliff. He keeps coming up with these great inventions and ideas to stop him from falling off, but somehow the same thing keeps happening over and over and over again. And I kind of equate that to what's happening with us. We keep coming up with new ways to spread more information, but instead we seem to just spread the same information in different ways, leading to a similar result. But the good news is that there are real answers and information out there, and there's an ability to gain an understanding about how our money systems work and how you can use them to benefit you. You can kind of move the fear to the side if you're able to see through it. And I think there's a few key steps to doing this. Dig into the why, understand how it works, and then act on what's in your control. Like, you know how earlier I mentioned that example about how we're kind of taught to just use one bank for everything, even though it might not be the best option? For me, it took me a while to get over that fear in my personal finance journey and whatever that feeling was for me that I had to stick with one specific bank, but I ended up kind of changing it to looking at how I would look at different streaming platforms. Like, I love watching Breaking Bad, I love watching Game of Thrones, I recently really liked watching Severance as well, but all of those different shows are in different streaming platforms. Not one platform has every single one of the best shows, and banks are really similar. Not one individual bank is gonna have the best checking account option, the best saving account option, or the best investment options. And I've been able to test this out myself because before I used the same bank for all of those different things, but if I hadn't made the switch to the new high interest savings account that I'm using, I wouldn't have made $269.01 to be very exact from my savings account last year, which is a lot more than the $1 literally that I would have made if I just stuck with that same old bank for that savings account.
If you want to hear more about how our money systems work, check out this video next on how anyone can make it, but not everyone can. And with that, we'll see you next week. You guys already know the vibes, and let's go.